And if you're just tuning in, Brett, you must receive your notice of intended prosecution within 2 weeks of the speeding date. You can appeal and get this cancelled if you have just received it, interesting text. I hadn't even considered this. It does hark back. I do vaguely remember. There's a lot of urban myths around this kind of thing flying around the internet, though, aren't there? So you never know who to believe. So I set my producer, Swifty, who's not listening to me at the moment, the challenge to see if we could find someone qualified to speak to us about this very issue. Someone with real savvy when it comes to the ins and outs of the laws of the highway code and the road. I'm delighted to say, at short notice, he's dropped everything to join us live on BBC Radio WM. His name is Scott Dixon, and he is known as the Complaints Resolver. Scott, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Brett.
Thank you very much for coming on, my friend. I did not expect to be speaking to you today on the show, so I'm really grateful. So, Scott, I've just set the table there. I mean, first of all, you're the complaints resolver, and I presume, let's get this out of the way straight away. My mate should cough up, shouldn't he?
No, in a nutshell.
Oh,
and,
all right.
Your listener is right, and under the current law, anyone caught speeding must receive a notice of intended prosecution within 14 days of the alleged offence. And it's just an allegation at this point in time. And if the driver pleads not guilty and swears on oath that the notice of intended prosecution did not arrive within 14 days, then the onus is on the prosecution to prove that it did. And if you can successfully argue your case, it's likely to be thrown out by the magistrates.
That is interesting, Scott, because like I said earlier, there's a lot of, and I know this is what you do, there's a lot of stuff flying around the internet about what's right, what's wrong with this kind of thing. So to clarify, you're telling me I got done on New Year's Day. I did not get the notice through the post until last week, which by my reckoning was 5 or 6 weeks onwards. Yeah. So if I go through some sort of appeal procedure, in theory, I hasten to use the term get away with it, Scott, because I was speeding, but this is what you call a technicality, a loophole.
Yeah, it's only an allegation that you were speeding. It hasn't yet been proved in the magistrate's court. So it's just an allegation at this point. And whilst you may have been speeding, the fact remains that you didn't receive it in good time. And I would cite the Royal Mail strikes on your appeal, because it's likely to have been affected by the Royal Mail strikes. And this advice has come from Nick Freeman, who's the celebrity defence criminal lawyer. He spoke about this fairly recently.
Nick has been on this radio station a number of times, Scott. But, Scott, here's the thing, and I know what you say. I mean, the Royal Mail strike, I appreciate that. I think that'd be fairly difficult to prove. But, Scott, the problem is, right, by my own admission, I am inherently lazy. And in terms of appealing and going through the process, is this a time-consuming process, if you see what I mean?
I don't think it is. All you have to do is lodge a well-constructed appeal citing that you did not receive it in time, plead not guilty, cite the Royal Mail strikes, and it puts the onus on the prosecution to prove that you did. And how can they prove that you received it in good time over the Christmas period during the Royal Mail strikes?
Well, there's only been a few Royal Mail strikes, and I think it's fair to say the 6-week... I know I'm talking myself out of this now, but in terms of the Royal Mail strikes accounting for a 6-week delay. But, Scott, I've heard other stories, because unfortunately I do know other people who have been, quote, done for speeding recently. And you hear that it's taking longer for the notices to arrive. What is that? Is that due to some sort of backlog? Because back in the old days, Scott, I mean, in fairness, I've not been done for speeding before, but I know a lot who have. And back in the old days, you used to get the notice arriving on your doormat within days, didn't you, of the alleged offence?
Yeah, there are backlogs, and there were backlogs at the time. And the Daily Express did an investigation over the Christmas period, well, on the run-up to Christmas, and 1 in 3 letters did not arrive that they posted. They posted 120 letters from different locations, and 1 in 3 didn't arrive. So there were backlogs at the time, and it's the Royal Mail strikes that have caused the delays, and that cannot really be disputed because it was well publicised at the time. I would lodge an appeal citing that, saying it's out of time, not guilty, deny the alleged offence, and it puts the onus on them to prove otherwise.
Yeah. Scott, I hear what you're saying, and thank you. Listen, I really appreciate you coming on and clearing that up and offering that advice. Thank you. And quickly, before I let you go, Scott, the Complaints Resolver, I presume you've got a website?
Yeah, you can find out more on my website, thecomplaintsresolver.co.uk, and I'm on Twitter at Scott_expert.
Interesting. Scott, thank you. Really appreciate your time this lunchtime.
Welcome,
Thanks
Brett.
very much for coming on. Really appreciate it.